There are many reasons you may want to include sound within button or movie clip symbols. Interaction effects and animation events among them. This lesson will demonstrate some ways of doing this. So the first thing I'm going to do is use my rectangle tool to draw out a button on my stage. And I'll just modify this a little bit in terms of the gradient properties so that it looks more like a button than it does right now. So I'll choose a linear gradient and the gradient transform tool. And let's switch this around. Okay, so that looks more like a button. So now we will select this rectangle, go to Modify, Convert to Symbol, choose a button symbol, and I'll just call it BTN for button, and hit OK. So now we have a button symbol in our library. So the next thing we need to do is actually find a sound that we want to use to make a little click noise when someone clicks on this button. So to do that, we're going to go to Window, Common Libraries, Sounds. We could also import any sounds that we want, but in this case, Flash Professional CS6 actually comes with this entire library of different little sounds that we can use. So let's find one that might work for us. So you can see there's a large number of different sounds here. So let's choose this little sound right here. All we need to do is pull that into our library and then close out that external library. Then we have our sound. We can preview it up here. And that makes just the nicest little tiny click or a tiny little squeak that we can use to perform some sort of audio feedback to the user after they've clicked our button. So let's double click on this button symbol instance on the stage. And we have our up, over, down, and hit states. So let's go through here, and I'm going to use the insert timeline keyframe for each of these states. And then for each of the states, I'm just going to modify these things a little bit. Just the properties of my stroke, for instance. I'll make that red on the down state. And on the over state, let's make it kind of a light yellow color. So up, over, down, and hit. And for the up state, let's actually make that a little gray. Okay, good. So that's all our graphics. So that's great. I'm going to make another layer here for sound. So let's rename this one sound. And this first one we'll rename skin. So in my sound layer here, I'm going to want to only have the sound actually execute on the down state. So I'm going to right click and say insert blank keyframe. I'm going to do the same thing to these others here, to my hit state, just to keep things nice and clean. You don't really have to, but it'll prevent it from spilling over in the case that something strange happens, right? So on my down state, all I need to do is grab this sound from the library and pull it right in there. And we can see that when I do that, it shows us that little bit of waveform there. So let's go and control test movie test. So here's our button, and our states are working just fine. So let's click. Notice we don't actually hear anything now. The reason for that is because by default, in our properties for this particular frame, this is set right now to stream, just because that's the last thing that I had chosen in order to use a sound. So that means that any little piece of the sound is going to sync to that frame and only that piece of the sound. That's not what we want to happen. Since this is only one frame, we're not going to hear anything. So let's change this sync. We can change this to either event or start. Either one is going to work in this case. So let's change it to event. And then we'll go again, control, test movie, test. So now when I click, we're able to actually hear that noise execute on my down state. So this could be applied to movie clip symbols as well if we want some certain sound to occur. Let's say we're creating a game, and one of the states within our movie clip symbol is an explosion. So maybe it's an asteroid, and by default the asteroid is silent, but if the player object shoots a laser and blows up the asteroid, we want a sound to execute. In that case, that's another good reason to use an event sound like this. So this has been an example of how to use sound within symbols in Flash Professional CS6.